Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a journey back in time to an era that, well, often gets labeled dark or maybe primitive.
Right, the Middle Ages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if I told you that right in the heart of this era, brilliant minds were conceiving and constructing structures so audacious, so complex, they still sort of defy belief today.
It's a fascinating thought.
Imagine buildings that took not just years, but generations, sometimes even centuries to complete, soaring hundreds of feet into the sky.
And think about how they did it.
That's the thing. They did all of this without a single piece of structural steel, without, modern heavy machinery, and certainly without anything like our digital blueprints or CAD software.
hmm
How on earth did they manage such an impossible-seeming feat?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. So today, we're taking a deep dive into that very question, the incredible world of the medieval cathedral builders. We're going to challenge, I think, any preconceived notions you might have of just haphazard, rudimentary construction.
Mm.
Because what we're about to explore are, well, incredibly organized, really quite astonishingly sophisticated projects that continually pushed the very limits of what was thought possible with essentially just stone and glass.
It's so much more than just building.
It's not just a story of immense effort, though it was certainly that. It's really a profound tale of ingenuity, deep faith, and just astonishing human dedication.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really try and unearth the hidden secrets of these master masons. We want to explore the intricate logistics of their construction sites, which, as you'll discover, were far more advanced than many people probably give them credit for.
Right.
We aim to reveal this fascinating blend of empirical knowledge, practical, hands-on understanding, profound faith, obviously, and an extraordinary collaborative spirit that, well, quite literally brought these monumental achievements to life.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at how this lost world of craftsmanship didn't just create breathtaking architecture, which it clearly did, but actually laid some of the fundamental foundations for what we now call modern engineering.
That's a key point.
Absolutely. Our journey today is largely guided by a rich tapestry of historical insights into the medieval building world. We're drawing on detailed architectural analyses, historical accounts, including some key texts that explore the construction of Romanesque and Gothic structures and, the broader context of architectural history itself.
Okay, let's get into it then. The construction site itself. So let's maybe cast aside any romanticized notions of lone artisans just toiling away in isolation,
Right, the solitary genius myth.
Exactly. And forget the idea that medieval construction was just brute force and simple tools. We need to really unpack this right from the start because the medieval construction site was anything but primitive.
Far from it.
These weren't just haphazard collections of laborers. They were highly organized operations, far more complex and sophisticated than many might imagine. It was like a buzzing hive of activity, a masterclass in early project management, really.
That's a great way to put it. Project management before the term existed.
And at the very heart of this incredible organization was a figure who, well, truly embodies multidisciplinary expertise. The master mason.
The key player.
Absolutely. We're not talking about someone who just laid stones, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was a polymath.
Mm-hmm.
They were the creative visionary, the chief engineer, the lead designer, and the practical project manager, all rolled into one indispensable individual.
It's an incredible breadth of responsibility.
Imagine being responsible for everything from the initial artistic concept, the structural calculations which were critical, to the day-to-day coordination of hundreds, sometimes thousands, of workers.
Yeah.
Ensuring both the aesthetic grandeur and, crucially, the structural integrity of these colossal buildings. Mm-hmm. It's an almost unimaginable scope of responsibility when you think about it.
It truly is. And what's particularly striking, especially when you consider the common perception of, medieval anonymity.
Right, that everything was anonymous.
Exactly, is the level of recognition these individuals actually received. Far from being nameless cogs in a machine, as some might assume, master masons were sometimes really celebrated figures.
That's surprising.
It is. It's a powerful counter-narrative to that idea of completely anonymous medieval craftsmanship. Take Chartres Cathedral, for example. There are inscriptions found there, carved in white marble, dated 1288.
Okay.
These inscriptions don't just exist. They explicitly name Master Robert de Luzarches, followed by Thomas de Cormont, and then his son Renaud.
Wow. Name's right there.
Named right there. But it goes even deeper than that. Some historical accounts even tell us that pilgrims would travel on their knees through the labyrinth in the maze pattern on the floor.
Yeah, I know the ones.
Well, they weren't just doing it to revere saints. They were specifically looking to find the names and even the carved faces of these men of genius, who are often described as being of humble origin.
Faces. They carved their faces.
Sometimes, yes, or representations of them. This wasn't just passive recognition. It was a profound societal statement. It shows the church consciously elevating and celebrating engineering and design brilliance.
So even in that age of collective faith.
Right. Even then, individual mastery and problem solving was revered. It was seen, perhaps, as divine inspiration made manifest through skill.
That really changes the picture.
Yeah.
Now, how does that compare to, say, modern construction roles?
Well, it's quite different. If we draw a parallel to today, we see project delivery systems evolving to provide, one-stop shopping for clients, often through specialized contracts like design build or construction management.
Right, very compartmentalized.
Very. We have contemporary tools like building information modeling BIM, which tend to separate design from analysis.
Yeah.
You have structural analysis here, thermal analysis there, quantity takeoff, scheduling, procurement, often handled by different platforms, different specialists.
Requiring lots of coordination between them.
Exactly. Specific data exchanges, translations between software. The medieval master mason, however, embodied this integration directly. They held all those critical functions, concept, design, engineering, management, within a single, highly skilled individual.
That's incredible integration.
It speaks to a holistic approach that modern methods, for all their power and efficiency, often fragment. This integration was, partly a practical necessity born of the times, but it's also an incredible display of individual human capacity.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to imagine them maybe sketching designs in the dirt with a stick, then going off to supervise the quarrying of stone and later calculating the thrust of a vault, all in one kind of continuous mental and physical process.
A true master builder in every
Yeah.
sense. Okay, so you have this singular figure, the master mason, with this immense vision. But how do they actually organize the hundreds, maybe thousands of workers needed? What was the human element, the sort of collaborative structure?
Yep.
Sounds like an early version of maybe organized labor.
It absolutely was a highly structured environment, functioning very much like an early form of organized labor, as you say. The construction site was a complex social system, really a network of specialized skills.
Okay.
You had distinct branches of stone workers, for instance. There were the quarrymen who extracted the raw material.
At the source.
Exactly. Alongside them, makers of stone mortars and the stone cutters who did the initial shaping, they formed one group, almost like a supply chain in itself.
Makes sense.
Then you had another distinct group, the plasterers, the mortar makers, the guys creating the essential binding agents, and the masons themselves, the skilled layers and fine shapers of the stone on site. Each group had its specific expertise and, importantly, its place in the hierarchy.
So it wasn't just a free-for-all.
Oh, definitely not. And this wasn't some informal arrangement either. We have historical documents like the Statutes of Etienne Boileau. He codified Parisian trade regulations back in the 13th century.
Okay, what do they say?
Well, they provide fascinating insight. They explicitly state, for example, that the mortar maker and the plasterer are of the same rank and belong in every way to the same Mason's Lodge.
So defined ranks and affiliations.
Exactly. This isn't just a casual observation. It demonstrates a clear, legally defined hierarchy and an essential interdependence among the various crafts. Everyone had their specific role, often defined by tradition and skill level, and these roles were formally recognized and governed.
Within these lodges or guilds.
Precisely. It was a true collaborative ecosystem where specialized knowledge was meticulously passed down from master to apprentice, perfected over generations within these highly organized guilds or lodges.
It's interesting you mentioned Masons lodges. I've heard the term Freemason before, and it seems like there must be a connection here. Is that where the famous institution of Freemasonry actually originated?
That's a very perceptive question, and yes, it's directly linked. The very English words we use to designate different workmen, like Mason, actually reveal the origin of the term Freemason and how operative Freemasonry developed.
Operative meaning. Actual building.
Exactly. This guild system initially focused entirely on the practical, physical building of structures, the operative work of stone, gradually saw a really fascinating transformation over centuries.
How so?
Well, over time, more and more cultivated men or non-operative masons. So Individuals who weren't physical stonecutters but were interested in the craft's philosophy, its history, maybe its symbolic aspects, they began to join the ranks of these lodges.
Ah, so intellectuals and patrons joining the Workers' Guild.
Kind of, yeah. This intellectual shift eventually led to the formation of the Grand Lodge in London in 1717, which was a really pivotal moment. And that led to the subsequent rise of what's called speculative Freemasonry.
Speculative as in theoretical,
Philosophical. Precisely. This speculative form has been aptly defined as a particular system of ethics, clouded by allegories and illustrated by symbols. It became a moral and philosophical society. So you see this clear centuries-long transition. It starts as a purely practical, hands-on craft focused on building cathedrals,
Right.
and evolves into a more symbolic philosophical association. But its deep roots are absolutely embedded in the organizational structure, the hierarchy, and even the ethical codes of these medieval builders and their guilds.
Wow. It's a powerful example of how practical communities can evolve into much broader cultural movements over time.
Absolutely. Hashtag 1.3 financing, labor practices, and multi-generational timelines.
So, okay, we have the organization, the skills,
Mm-hmm.
but these cathedrals weren't quick builds you could just, knock out in a few years, were they?
Oh, heavens no. Not even close.
They were monumental undertakings that literally spanned generations, often involving what's been called a cathedral crusade to inspire new building efforts, sometimes even after devastating events like the Hundred Years' War had taken their toll.
Right. Restarting after huge setbacks.
It's hard to wrap your head around starting a project that you know you'll never see completed in your lifetime. How did they even begin to fund something like that, year after year, century after century?
Financing was, and this is no exaggeration, a truly monumental and continuous challenge, especially given the sheer scale and that multi-generational nature you mentioned.
So not like getting a big loan up front.
No, nothing like that. Unlike today, where you might secure massive funding up front, medieval financing was a constant, often piecemeal endeavor. The sheer size meant that money, labor, and crucial materials had to be acquired over incredibly long periods.
Through different means.
Exactly, through a diverse and often unpredictable set of sources. For instance, back in 12th century France, under the feudal system, architects frequently lacked the space necessary for building.
They couldn't even get the land easily.
Often not. They struggled to acquire the very land for construction and frequently faced considerable opposition from local landowners. It wasn't just land either. Materials posed immense problems too.
Like the stone.
Like the stone, but also timber. There was no fixed market price for timber, for example. Imagine trying to build a complex roof structure when you had to acquire your framing spar by spar, literally beam by beam, log by log,
Piece by piece.
from maybe 20 different landowners, each only willing or able to sell you a few pieces. And forget a fixed price. If they knew you needed it for the cathedral,
Price goes up.
you'd likely pay dearly. This wasn't just an inefficiency, it was a constant grinding challenge that required incredible persistence, negotiation skills, and adaptability from the master mason and the cathedral chapter managing the project.
So even after managing the design and the workforce, the sheer logistics of getting this stuff must have been a nightmare. Was it like ordering from, I don't know, medieval Amazon, or more like a desperate treasure hunt?
Oh, far, far more like a protracted, sometimes desperate scavenger hunt. Stone, too, had to be sought for in various quarries from different proprietors.
Different owners for different quarries.
Yes, and then transported, either at great expense for cartage hiring wagons and oxen, or sometimes by voluntary aid from the community, people pitching in.
Wow.
Even essential materials like lime, which is crucial for making strong mortar, were often supplied at intervals and in small quantities.
So you couldn't just get a big delivery.
Nope. This context is dramatically different compared to, say, the Roman method of building. That really highlights the medieval builders' ingenuity.
How did the Romans differ?
Well, the Romans, building their massive structures, required considerable space for the preparations. They leveled the whole surface. They used massive wooden framework centers for their concrete vaults.
Right, known for their concrete.
And they needed very considerable stores of gravel, brick, sand, but particularly lime, to execute that concrete work uninterruptedly. They had the state power, the organization required to build such an edifice, often using state requisitions, military labor, even slaves.
Ah, centralized power structure.
Exactly. Medieval builders, operating under a much more fragmented feudal system, not as absolute masters, had to find incredibly ingenious ways to manage these severe resource constraints. Their success really lay in their adaptability to a much more fragmented, less centralized supply chain. And often, they had to rely heavily on the deep faith and the collective will of the local people to make it happen.
That makes perfect sense. So labor wasn't just about paid workers then. It sounds like it was a mix of maybe obligation and this immense communal spirit.
Precisely. Labor, just like materials, was a complex tapestry. Some tasks, especially the heavier, more grueling work like hauling stone, sometimes involved forced labor or conscripts, often as a feudal obligation owed to a lord or the church.
Okay.
But the sheer scale and the sustained nature of these projects, spanning decades or centuries, meant that they couldn't possibly rely solely on coercion. That wouldn't last.
Right. People would resist.
Exactly. The success of these projects also relied heavily, fundamentally, on a profound communal and spiritual drive. We see historical evidence of entire towns, and sometimes the whole population, contributing in various ways, from making donations large or small to offering actual physical labor during specific cathedral crusades or peak phases of construction.
So a real community effort.
This collective enthusiasm, this shared sense of purpose, was absolutely crucial for sustaining the immense effort over decades and centuries.
Can you give an example of that drive?
Well, consider the fascinating example of Abbot Sugar in the Abbey Church of St. Denis back in the mid-12th century. Sugar was driven by an almost manic urgency.
Urgency, why?
He explicitly stated he wished that the edifice should be quickly built. He was urgent that it should be finished, fearing that his successor would not continue the undertaking.
Worried it wouldn't get finished after he was gone.
Exactly. Personal legacy, perhaps, but also genuine fear for the project. And the pace was incredible. King Louis le Gros laid the first stone in June 1140, and astonishingly, the consecration of the new choir and facade was in June 1144.
4 years for St. Denis. It's unbelievably fast.
It's incredibly rapid for such a significant, innovative structure, a testament to intense focus effort. Now, this haste, as the source calls it, wasn't without its consequences.
Oh.
Yeah. It later led to documented negligence exhibited in the erection, the inadequacy of the foundations at some points, and parts of the nave and transept actually needed to be rebuilt about a century later.
So speed came at a cost.
It did, but it undeniably indicates a powerful desire for rapidly achieving an extraordinary result of astonishing the multitude. For his contemporaries, St. Denis was considered one of the marvels of the West. This urgency, even with its trade-offs, shows how intensely motivated leaders and communities could be to manifest their faith in stone, to create something awe-inspiring now. It's a tension between that grand vision and the practical pressures of time and resources that continued throughout the entire cathedral building period.
A very human element to it all. It truly is astounding, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you stand inside one of these cathedrals or even just look up at the outside, your mind just reels at the complexity. How did they possibly translate these incredibly intricate designs into stone with basically just hand tools in their minds? This is where the true genius and maybe some lost knowledge really starts to emerge. How did they actually plan these monumental creations?
That's the core question, isn't it? The leap from idea to towering reality.
How do they translate these incredibly complex designs into stone? We're talking about intricate arches, soaring vaults with complex rib patterns, delicate window tracery, all designed to seemingly precise proportions. Today we use sophisticated software, 3D model.
Right, digital precision.
But back then, without modern CAD software, how did they achieve such astonishing precision? While our sources don't explicitly detail every single aspect of, say, tracing floors for every cathedral.
Which were large flat surfaces for drawing full-scale templates.
Exactly. The sheer precision you see in the finished buildings points to a profound, practical understanding of geometry and design principles.
You've hit on a crucial point there. It absolutely wasn't by chance or guesswork. The historical record shows that the secular architects of the 12th and 13th centuries in France applied them principles of proportion with a geometrical rigor, which is interesting to observe.
Geometrical rigor, so math was key.
Math, but applied geometry, really. This wasn't some haphazard fiddling or purely aesthetic choice. It was a deeply empirical, craft-based knowledge system rooted in practical geometry that allowed them to achieve incredibly intricate and precise designs.
How did they learn and apply it?
Well, we know, for instance, that the works of Euclid, the ancient Greek mathematician from the 3rd century BC, were known and influential, often through translations. This suggests a solid foundation in geometric principles being passed down and actively applied.
So they had the theory.
They had access to the theory, yes, But the key was the application. Their workshops, or masons' lodges, would have been centers for this kind of rigorous, practical geometric application. They used tools like compasses, squares, set squares, plumb bobs, and marked lines, all with extraordinary skill.
And the tracing floors.
And yes, often working with full-scale drawings on specially prepared tracing floors, large, smooth plaster or wooden surfaces, or sometimes even directly onto plaster walls within the lodge. Imagine drawing a massive, complex window pattern, life-size, directly on the floor before a single piece of stone was even cut for it.
That requires incredible spatial awareness.
Absolutely. It was a painstaking yet incredibly effective method for ensuring precision and coordinating the work of multiple stonecutters working on different parts of the same element.
So what does this rigorous, geometrically driven approach mean for the very essence of medieval architecture? It sounds like they weren't just, building structures. They were following a kind of philosophy where every single element had a structural purpose.
That's beautifully put. That's the ultimate design philosophy that really defines Gothic architecture, especially. For these medieval architects, form wasn't some arbitrary aesthetic choice you added on later, or just an afterthought. It was deeply, fundamentally intertwined with the structure itself.
Form follows function, in a way.
In the most profound way, as one of our sources so eloquently puts it, every member of this architecture is the result of a necessity of that structure. As in the vegetable and the animal kingdom, there is not a form or a process that is not produced by a necessity of the organism. The design flowed directly from structural necessity, from the very forces at play within the stone. It's an organic, holistic approach.
Okay, explain that organic idea a bit more. How is it different from, say, Roman building?
Right. This point is absolutely crucial, and it's one of the defining differences. Think about it. A typical Roman building, like the Pantheon, for example, could be stripped of all its decorations or deprived of its external form without prejudice to the construction.
The structure underneath holds up regardless of the decoration.
Exactly. Its majestic dome stands whether it's faced with marble or brick. It may be clothed with a form that has no necessary or intimate connection with the structure. Its ornament could be added or removed without fundamentally altering its stability or its core function.
Okay, got it.
But for a 13th century Gothic edifice, the situation is entirely different. It is impossible to remove decorative forms or attach any to it without detriment to its solidity, its organism.
So the decoration is part of the structure.
Precisely. In Gothic architecture, the form is the expression, maybe an embellished expression, but still the direct expression of the structure. The ribs you see crisscrossing a vault aren't just decorative lines. They are actively channeling the downward forces. The pinnacles on top of buttresses aren't just fancy spikes. Their weight helps drive the thrust downwards.
Yeah, and the buttresses themselves.
The buttresses aren't just external additions tacked on. They are integral parts of the load-bearing system, counteracting the outward push of the vaults. If you were to change the underlying structure, say, the shape of the vault or the height of the wall, the visible forms must change too, because they are fundamentally one and the same system.
Wow.
This organic unity between form and function is a defining characteristic, a true hallmark of these incredible buildings. It's a testament to their deeply integrated design philosophy. They truly understood that beauty could emerge directly from structural necessity.
That seamless integration of form and function, that organic approach.
Yeah.
It sounds like a truly revolutionary way of thinking about building. And it clearly led to some groundbreaking innovations. The evolution from the earlier Romanesque style to Gothic was nothing short of a true architectural revolution, wasn't it? It completely transformed the possibilities of what a building could be, especially internally.
It was indeed a monumental leap forward, a genuine paradigm shift in construction. A really pivotal moment occurred, as we mentioned, around 1144 at the Abbey Church of St. Denis near Paris. There, not only was the traditional round arch largely abandoned in favor of the pointed arch,
Which directs forces more downwards.
exactly, more efficiently downwards, but beyond just the arch shape, a completely new system of construction called Gothic has been invented. This wasn't just a stylistic tweak, it was a fundamental re-engineering of how massive stone structures could be built to achieve unprecedented height and light.
Okay, so how did Gothic specifically address the limitations of Romanesque? You mentioned Romanesque churches could be quite dark inside.
Right. What's particularly fascinating is how directly Gothic design tackled those inherent limitations. If you picture a typical Romanesque structure, maybe like the Church of St. Foy in Conques, France, you'd see heavy, semicircular barrel-vaulted ceilings over the main nave.
Thick and heavy.
Very. These vaults exerted enormous outward pressure, pushing the walls outwards. This necessitated massive, thick walls, often buttressed internally by heavy clustered piers, and solid transverse arches spanning the nave.
Lots of solid stone.
Lots of solid stone. And to provide additional support, they often had these galleries, called tribunes, built over the side aisles with their own heavy vaults, quadrant vaults reinforced by lateral fins, which further buttressed the main nave vault from the sides.
Sounds very robust.
It was incredibly robust, but structurally inefficient in a way. And that heavy gallery level, the tribune, while structurally important, unfortunately blocked most of the direct light from reaching the central nave space. So the illumination in Romanesque churches was often quite diffuse, quite dim. It certainly could enhance the sense of height and mystery, and often emphasized the east end, the apse, where you might get large windows in the curved walls of radiating chapels, and others directly below the apse half-dome, creating what the source calls a luminous crown. But the main body of the church, the nave, often remained quite dark and enclosed.
Okay, so Gothic architecture found a way to basically get rid of those thick walls and galleries to let in the light, while still supporting those immense stone roofs. That really does sound like some kind of structural magic trick.
It was structural magic, but magic rooted in pure engineering genius. Gothic design fundamentally overcame this light obstruction and the need for incredibly thick, solid walls. The sheer brilliance lay primarily in two interconnected innovations, the pointed arch, which we mentioned, and the ribbed vault.
The crisscrossing patterns on the ceiling.
Exactly. The ribbed vault concentrated the weight and thrust of the ceiling onto specific points, onto the piers below, rather than distributing it evenly along the entire wall like a barrel vault.
Okay, so channeling the forces.
Precisely. And then came the star of the show, the flying buttress. These are those dramatic, soaring arches, literally flying arches that leap from the upper part of the main nave walls over the roofs of the lower side aisles to connect to massive external piers or pillars standing outside the main building footprint.
Right, the external skeleton.
Exactly. It's like an elegant skeletal structure on the outside. These flying buttresses collected and cleverly redirected the enormous outward push, the lateral thrust generated by those high, pointed rib vaults. Imagine those tremendous forces, like a heavy tent trying to spread outwards at the top, being caught by these flying arms and channeled safely downwards and outwards, away from the main structure, into the ground through those heavy external piers.
That's ingenious.
It's absolutely ingenious, and the consequence was revolutionary. This system meant the main nave walls no longer had to be impossibly thick and heavy just to resist those outward forces. They could be thinned dramatically, they could be opened up, and crucially, they could be filled with vast, soaring, ethereal stained glass windows.
Letting the light pour in.
That's how they pushed the limits of stone and glass to achieve unprecedented internal light and openness. It created an almost heavenly, luminous, spiritual atmosphere inside. The light itself almost became a structural component, dematerializing the stone, transforming the spiritual experience of the worshiper, making the solid structure feel incredibly weightless and transcendent.
It truly did change everything. The structural daring, the use of light. It's truly breathtaking.
Yeah.
But all of this, of course, relies fundamentally on the right materials being available and usable. Cathedrals were, at their core, massive stone masonry wall systems. What kind of stone were they typically using, and how much did that vary? Did they just use whatever was nearby?
You're absolutely right. The materials themselves were just as critical as the ingenious design, and the choice of stone very often reflected the local geology. They were incredibly adept at using what was available. The type of stone used varied significantly by region.
For example?
Well, for instance, the famous oolite limestone belt that runs through parts of England and France, it's a pale, fine-grained stone formed from tiny spherical grains like fish eggs, hence the name oolite.
Okay.
This stone was particularly suitable for building brand structures. It was relatively soft and easy to carve when freshly quarried, allowing for those intricate details, sculptures, and tracery you see.
Right, the detailed work.
Exactly. Yet it hardened considerably upon exposure to air, offering immense durability and the strength needed to bear the enormous weight of the structure. But if you head west and north in England, you encounter much harder, older rock formations, like the Pennant Sandstone.
Different properties entirely.
Completely different. This sandstone was so tough, they'd often cleave it, split it along its natural bedding planes into roofing slates. These sandstone slates could sometimes be up to an inch thick.
An inch thick for a roof tile. That's massive.
Incredibly heavy, yes, but also immensely durable, providing a robust, fireproof, long-lasting roof. You see examples from Bristol in the Middle Ages using these pennant slabs. These regional differences really highlight the intensely adaptive nature of medieval construction. They generally weren't importing special stone from hundreds of miles away. They were masters at utilizing locally available resources to their maximum potential, often developing sophisticated quarrying and working techniques specific to the local geology.
So locally sourced stone whenever possible. But what about other essential materials? We've seen those medieval illustrations of building sites with massive wooden scaffolds reaching way up high. Timber must have been absolutely crucial, right?
Timber was another absolutely vital component, not just for the structural elements like complex roof trusses and internal floors, but extensively, as you say, for scaffolding, lifting devices like treadwheel cranes, and crucially, for the temporary centering, the wooden frameworks used to support arches and vaults while the mortar set.
Right, you can't build an arch in midair.
Exactly. Images depicting the construction of St. Denis, for instance, clearly imply the extensive use of scaffolding and building with pulleys to raise heavy stones to incredible heights. However, acquiring wood, especially the large, straight, strong timbers needed for major structural work or tall scaffolding, was often a constant struggle.
Why was it so hard to get wood? Weren't there forests?
There were forests, yes, but ownership was fragmented and demand was high. The great French architectural historian Viollet-le-Duc, writing in the 19th century but drawing on deep historical knowledge, vividly stresses the difficulty faced in medieval France. He describes a scenario where we have to go and seek our framing spar by spar, literally beam by beam, or maybe log by log, among 20 proprietors, from each of whom we shall only get a few pieces.
20 different landowners just to build one roof.
Potentially, yes. And to complicate matters further, he notes, quote, "If it is known that we want it for a major project like a cathedral, since there is no fixed market price, we shall have to pay dearly for the timber." This fragmented supply chain, combined with transport difficulties, meant master masons and their teams had to be incredibly resourceful, patient, skilled negotiators, and long-term planners. They couldn't just call a lumber yard and order what they needed. It was a complex logistical ballet performed over vast tracts of land, often requiring years of planning just for timber acquisition alone.
Wow. Okay, stone, timber. What about the mortar? The glue holding it all together, was that another logistical challenge?
Absolutely. Mortar makers and plasterers were key figures, forming one of those distinct branches of stoneworkers we discussed earlier. Their skill was essential, and the key ingredient for strong, durable mortar was lime.
Made from limestone.
Yes, by burning limestone or chalk in kilns at high temperatures. This lime was absolutely fundamental even for Roman concrete, which, as we noted, required very considerable stores, particularly lime. But in medieval France, procuring sufficient lime was often notoriously difficult.
Another supply chain issue.
Yes. The source material indicates it was often supplied only at intervals and in small quantities. This logistical constraint again underscores the need for adaptive practices and meticulous planning over extended timelines. They had to manage the limited and sometimes inconsistent availability of this crucial building material. They weren't building with today's standardized, factory-produced Portland cement. They were making their own binder, burning the limestone, carefully slaking the quicklime with water, and mixing it correctly with sand, often right there on site. It was a process that was both labor-intensive and entirely dependent on a steady, albeit sometimes intermittent, supply of the raw lime. Every single aspect, it seems, from the largest carved stone block down to the smallest batch of lime mortar, presented its own unique, often profound, logistical puzzle to be solved.
It paints a picture of constant problem solving.
Exactly. Continuous adaptation.
Okay, so beyond the sheer technical brilliance and the incredible organizational prowess we've been discussing, there was clearly a deeper, maybe almost intangible force at play that really powered these multi-generational endeavors.
The why.
Yeah, the why. These were not just construction projects in the modern sense. They were profound acts of faith. They were immense community commitments. And they were powerful cultural statements that were intended to span centuries. Hashtag, tag, 3.1, faith and collective undertaking. It's hard to imagine, maybe, in our more individualistic world today, that entire towns, indeed, as the sources say, sometimes the whole population, were motivated to contribute to these monumental undertakings. What kind of collective spirit, what kind of belief system does it take to sustain such a massive effort over decades, even centuries, knowing you personally will likely never see the finished product?
That's truly the heart of the matter, isn't it? What's so fascinating here is the sheer communal drive, which seems deeply rooted in a profound, pervasive religious faith that really shaped daily life and worldview in the Middle
It
Ages.
was central to everything.
Absolutely. Take, for example, the period after the devastation of the Hundred Years' War in France. Many building projects had stalled, some cathedrals were even damaged or destroyed. But the church chapters didn't just give up and say, well, that's that.
What do they do?
They actively attempted to inspire a new cathedral crusade. That phrasing is significant. They sought to involve not just the usual handful of skilled builders, but the whole population once again.
So rallying the community.
Exactly. This wasn't merely about gathering labor or raising funds, though that was part of it. It was about rekindling a powerful collective spiritual commitment. It suggests a widespread societal understanding that the cathedral wasn't just the bishop's project, it was their project. It was a shared offering to God, a powerful source of civic pride and identity, and perhaps even seen as a tangible promise of salvation or divine favor for the community.
A focus for collective hope.
Precisely. And this dedication endured. Even as late as the 16th century, long after the peak of Gothic construction and with the Reformation bringing changing religious landscapes, we see evidence of cathedral canons determinedly try to finish the building of abandoned cathedrals. This reflects a continued, deeply ingrained dedication, even when the initial fervor might have faded or circumstances changed dramatically.
That's remarkable persistence.
It speaks volumes about the intrinsic value these communities placed on these sacred structures. They saw them as absolutely essential to their identity, their history, and their spiritual well-being, something worth finishing even centuries later.
That's a powerful point about collective identity and persistence. But you also mentioned earlier that sometimes there was this real sense of urgency, almost a race against time for some projects to get them built quickly, like with Abbot Sugar.
Yes, there is often an immense sense of urgency, especially for significant high-profile projects led by dynamic figures. We touched upon the extraordinary example of Abbot Sugar's haste at St. Denis.
Right, the four-year wonder.
Exactly. Sugar was driven by a powerful personal and spiritual imperative. He explicitly states, as we heard, that he wished that the edifice should be quickly built. He was urgent that it should be finished, fearing that his successor would not continue the undertaking.
So it was partly practical concern, but also maybe ambition.
It seems like a mix. A deep desire to complete a sacred task within his lifetime, perhaps secure his legacy, ensure the vision wasn't lost. The fact that King Louis le Gros laid the first stone in June 1140 and the consecration of the new choir and facade happened in June 1144 is just astonishingly rapid for such a grand and innovative structure. Now, as we also noted, the speed, this haste, wasn't without its long-term consequences. It did lead to documented issues later on. Negligence exhibited in the erection, the inadequacy of the foundations at some points, requiring parts to be rebuilt a century later.
The price of speed.
The price of speed. It tells us that even with immense motivation and resources, there were trade-offs between speed and long-term perfection or durability. However, it undeniably indicates a powerful desire in that specific context for rapidly achieving an extraordinary result of astonishing the multitude. They wanted to make a statement quickly.
A statement of faith and power.
Precisely.
Yeah.
For his contemporaries, St. Denis was universally regarded as one of the marvels of the West. This drive to create something truly awe-inspiring, a physical manifestation of their faith and a marvel for their age, motivated an extraordinary collective effort, even if it meant taking some structural risks in the process. It reveals a complex human story, not just one of pure, unadulterated devotion, but also ambition, politics, and a very real desire to leave a lasting, visible mark on the world.
So, weaving all this together, the organization, the materials, the motivation, it's clear these builders weren't simply following some ancient, static blueprints handed down unchangingly. Their knowledge seems to have developed through a very dynamic, empirical, hands-on process. They were learning, observing, and adapting as they went along, constantly refining their craft over generations. How did this continuous learning actually manifest itself on such massive, long-term projects?
It's truly a testament to iterative development. Centuries before Silicon Valley coined the term, Their knowledge wasn't primarily derived from theoretical textbooks as we might understand them today, although some theory like Euclid was known. It was overwhelmingly grown, cultivated, and perfected empirically
Through practice.
through generations of hands-on experience, direct observation of what worked and what didn't, and a continuous process of trial, error, and refinement. This craft-based knowledge system aligns remarkably well, actually, with modern understandings of project, team development, and skill acquisition.
How
Well, as one modern project management text notes, by blending styles, continuing skill growth, and leveraging motivators, any project team member or stakeholder can motivate, influence, coach, and grow the project team. This core idea of continuous skill growth, honed through practical application and shared experience within a guild system, deeply resonates with the craft traditions of medieval masons.
learning by doing and teaching by showing.
Exactly. It wasn't about static knowledge frozen in a book. It was about a living, evolving body of expertise passed down directly from master to apprentice through demonstration, supervised practice, and shared problem solving on the job site. Each generation built upon the successes and learned from the failures of the last, perhaps experimenting with slightly bolder designs, higher vaults, or more refined stone-cutting techniques.
And this empirical approach, this learning culture, was it connected to broader shifts happening in society at the time?
Very much so. This practical empirical approach was also part of a significant cultural and intellectual shift that occurred around the 12th century. The sources point out that in the middle of the 12th century, the political and social condition of France was such as to break the connection between the arts and the monastic establishments.
Moving away from the monasteries controlling knowledge.
To a degree, yes. Before this period, much of the advanced architectural knowledge and skilled craftsmanship was indeed housed within monasteries. Monks were often key architects and builders, but a new secular school, purely secular, began to form.
Lay builders and architects.
Yes, lay professionals.
Okay.
And this secular school, according to the source, reacted against the perhaps more conservative monastic spirit by actively investigating new principles for hallowed traditions based more on science, on the observance of laws hitherto unrecognized in the art of construction.
Science in what sense? Not modern physics, surely.
Not science in the modern experimental lab-based sense, no, but rather a systematic empirical understanding of material behavior, structural forces, geometry, derived directly from observation, experience, and practical problem solving. A science of building learned through building.
So this Freemasonry we talked about earlier, the operative guilds, it wasn't just about organizing labor. It represented a new way of thinking, a more secular, perhaps more analytical approach to the craft of building.
Exactly. This development, often referred to as Freemasonry in its original operative form, became incredibly influential. It attracted skilled individuals from all the other bodies of the state, and its rigorous, practical, problem-solving approach transformed not only the other arts, but the handicrafts generally.
It raised the bar for skilled work across the board.
It seems so. It highlights a powerful transition towards a more independent, secular, and, in its own way, scientifically minded approach to building. Now, while some sources suggest the ideal was that the individual artist uses his inventive power, but does not attach his own name to his work,
Wow.
the work belongs to the corporation, the guild.
The anonymous craftsman idea again.
Right. The reality, as we saw with Chartres, seems more nuanced. The blend of both acknowledged individual genius, like Robert de Luzar's, and a strong collective craft tradition is truly evident. The collective, the guild, fostered the environment, preserved the knowledge, and enabled the large-scale execution. But the intellectual curiosity and daring of individuals drove the innovation forward.
A complex interplay.
Very. It's a picture showing both the anonymous pride of the guild and the occasional significant celebration of exceptional talent, all happening within this framework of continuous empirical learning and an evolving practical understanding of the laws of construction. They were, in essence, pioneering engineers, learning and innovating as they built.
Looking back at these truly monumental achievements, these cathedrals reaching for the heavens, it's impossible not to draw connections and maybe contrasts to our own era of building. The medieval builders operated with such a deep, intuitive, and empirical understanding of structural forces, materials, geometry, all without the formal scientific theories, the complex mathematical equations, or the advanced computational tools that we absolutely rely on today. It's a really remarkable contrast, isn't it?
It absolutely is. A world of difference in terms of tools and formal knowledge.
They truly were master improvisers and empirical scientists in their own right, weren't they? Using their generations of accumulated experience to gauge what would stand, what might fail, what forces were at play, all without the benefit of detailed stress analyses on a computer screen or wind tunnel testing. They learned by doing, by observing failures and successes, and by accumulating generations of practical wisdom. How did their empirical understanding sort of foreshadow or lay the groundwork for our modern engineering principles?
You've put your finger right on it. They built the foundation through practice. Their intuitive grasp of physics, learned through stone and timber, was astounding. Think about our modern understanding of stress and strain, for instance. We know mathematically that every beam must deflect under the load which is applied to it.
Right. Basic physics.
And we understand that the material on the concave or compression face will be shortened. Material on the convex or tension face will be lengthened. We also know that stone masonry, while incredibly strong in compression, being squeezed, cannot effectively take much tensile stress pulling forces, which is why it often cracks under tension.
Like bending a stone beam too far.
Exactly. Whereas timber beams, for instance, can take some tension. We understand how the distribution of stresses in a masonry wall or pier is complex, similar in ways to a beam, but with these critical material differences that dictate exactly how it can be loaded safely. Medieval masons, through sheer hands-on experience and incredibly acute observation passed down through the guilds, intuitively grasped these fundamental principles. They didn't have Hooke's law describing elasticity or finite element analysis software to model stresses.
No computers calculating load paths.
None of that. But they knew that stone vaults pushed outwards powerfully, and those outward forces, that thrust, needed to be resisted effectively. They learned through trial and error over centuries how to build vaults, ribbed vaults, pointed vaults, and buttresses, including those flying buttresses that successfully managed these forces, channeling them, diverting them safely down to the foundations and into the ground. That allowed them to construct these incredibly tall, yet stable and enduring structures that have stood for centuries.
So their practical knowledge was the precursor.
Absolutely. This empirical, craft-based knowledge, this deep, hands-on understanding of how specific materials behave under load, how forces travel through a complex structure, was the direct, essential precursor to the later development of formal engineering science, the mathematical models, and the material science we use today. They built the crucial practical foundation upon which later theorists and scientists could build the formal framework.
It's almost like they were, maybe subconsciously, mimicking nature's own engineering solutions in their designs. Does that resonate?
That's a beautiful way to put it, and it's an idea that's actually reinforced by some of our source material. The text offers a wonderful analogy suggesting that the trunk and rib cage of most vertebrates can be considered as a sort of simply supported beam.
Ah, like a biological structure.
Exactly. This analogy helps us visualize how the fundamental structural principles that medieval builders intuitively understood and applied principles of load-bearing, bracing, distribution of forces are deeply ingrained in the natural world all around us. They were, in a very real sense, observing nature's own successful engineering solutions, the way a tree branch efficiently supports its weight, or how a skeleton effectively distributes loads and resists forces. And they were applying those observed principles to their own colossal stone creations, long before the underlying scientific principles were formally articulated and mathematically quantified.
Learning from the master designer, nature.
In a way, yes. They learned from the world around them, from the behavior of the materials in their hands, and then translated that hard-won practical wisdom into truly awe-inspiring architecture. Hashtag tagged hashtag 4.2, contrasting a lost world with modern construction.
This whole deep dive into the cathedral builders really does celebrate a lost world, doesn't it? A world of incredible craftsmanship, deep-seated collaboration, and generation-spanning projects. It serves as such a powerful reminder that some of the most impressive, most enduring structures in all of human history were conceived and built without computers, without detailed blueprints in the modern sense, without laser levels, and without any of our advanced heavy machinery. It's a profound testament to human ingenuity in its purest, most collaborative form. It really makes you wonder what we've gained technologically, but perhaps also what we might have lost in the shift to modern construction methods.
That's a crucial reflection, and a very timely one, I think. If we draw stark contrast to modern construction practices, today we rely incredibly heavily on technologies like building information modeling, or BIM.
The digital twin of the building.
Exactly. And BIM isn't just a sophisticated drafting tool. It uses complex tools, platforms, and environments for incredibly detailed tasks like structural or thermal analysis, or quantity takeoff, scheduling, and procurement applications. We use parametric models where changing one dimension automatically updates others. We run simulations for conceptual cost estimating and perform clash detection.
Finding problems before they happen on site.
Precisely. Clash detection allows us to find where, say, a plumbing pipe might clash with a structural beam in the digital model before construction even begins. These are highly sophisticated systems, all designed to solve problems before they arise, to optimize efficiency, minimize waste, and predict outcomes with remarkable accuracy. It's a universe away from the medieval mason's compass, square, plumb bob, knotted rope, and their mental calculations, maybe sketched out on a full-scale tracing floor.
A completely different mindset and tool set.
Completely, and this comparison really does raise that important question you alluded to. What can we, in our high-tech, highly specialized, and often quite fragmented modern construction industry, truly learn from a time when such incredibly complex and ambitious projects were realized through, essentially, sheer human ingenuity, deep person-to-person collaboration, and that accumulated empirical, hands-on knowledge?
What lessons can we take?
Well, modern project management systems allow for tailoring based on context and using just enough processes, methods, templates, and artifacts to maximize value and efficiency. That sounds very sophisticated. But medieval builders, in their own way, were constantly tailoring their approach day by day, hour by hour sometimes, based on the immediate, often unpredictable challenges presented by the specific materials they had, the labor available that week, the weather conditions, the state of funding, and the conditions on the actual site.
Constant adaptation.
Constant adaptation was their reality. Their astounding success, the fact that these buildings stand at all, let alone are so magnificent, truly stemmed from an unparalleled adaptability, a profound embodied understanding of their craft, and a deep living body of knowledge honed over centuries in the face of immense, almost unimaginable constraints. It's a powerful lesson, perhaps, in resourcefulness, in the enduring strength of collective purpose when people share a vision, and in the incredible potential of human ingenuity, even maybe especially when operating without the technological safety nets we now consider absolutely indispensable.
Something profound to consider there. Hashtag tag tag outro. Well, we've journeyed back to the Middle Ages. We've explored the surprising sophistication and the meticulous organization of these cathedral construction sites. We've marveled again at the structural daring that gave us flying buttresses, ribbed vaults, and magnificent soaring spaces filled with light. And crucially, I think we've gained a much deeper appreciation for the profound spiritual and communal drive that fuel these incredible multi-generational projects, directly linking deep faith to groundbreaking engineering innovation. It's a story that really reshapes our understanding of an entire era, moving far beyond simplistic labels like dark or primitive.
Indeed. And considering the immense scale, the sheer complexity of these medieval cathedrals, built by what our sources described as a developing secular school that prioritized the observance of laws hitherto unrecognized in the art of construction, laws learned through practice, all achieved without the formal scientific frameworks or the powerful digital tools we absolutely rely on today. Perhaps the true enduring innovation lies not just in the breathtaking structures themselves.
But where then?
Rather, maybe it resides in that extraordinary human capacity for sustained, focused, collective effort over unimaginable timescales. In the relentless pursuit of practical knowledge through empirical observation, trial, and error, and in an unparalleled spirit of adaptation in the face of constant challenges and constraints. So if we try and connect this to the bigger picture for you, our listener. What enduring wisdom about building complex things, about deep collaboration across disciplines, about managing resources under constraint, and about sheer human endeavor? What wisdom could a modern construction project, or indeed any complex, long-term human undertaking facing its own unique complexities and resource challenges, gain by truly understanding and valuing this lost world of craftsmanship, beyond just admiring the beautiful aesthetic outcome of the cathedrals?
What's the deeper lesson?
Exactly. What could we really learn about resilience, about adaptation, about fostering innovation through practice, and about maintaining a sustained sense of purpose in our own projects today, simply by looking back with fresh eyes at the original deep dive into building that these medieval masons undertook centuries ago? Something to think about.